Right,
Hi,
Uncle?
Facebook. We are going to be letting people in from the waiting room in 1 minute. We have quite a few people. I'll play our theme song. I'll let people in. I'll have a welcome. I'll make a couple of announcements. We have a 12-year-old from Wisconsin, 12-year-old boy from Wisconsin who wants autographs of World War II veterans. We're going to make an appeal to get those. I'm going to tell a story from the World War II from the news. John Kramer's going to share a quick story. Then we're going to get to Bob and Lars. This will be great. All right. I'm going to share my sound. Here we go. Well, welcome to Greatest Generation Live here on Sunday, October 25th. And let's get this out of the way really quickly. Jim James, share with us the Steelers score.
27-24.
Oh boy. Okay, so we'll have some people. Then there's still how many minutes left in the game?
Less than 2.
Okay, so we're a couple minutes away from people. I think joining us.
They might lose too, the way they're playing.
Okay. All right.
They were playing real good, but they've kind of crumbled.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to Greatest Generation Live. I'm Todd DiPastino. This is the Veterans Breakfast Club. We are a nonprofit that has been holding veteran storytelling events since 2008. And since March of this year, these events have all gone virtual. We do 3 live events a week, one on Wednesday morning, the happy hour on Monday night, and then we have Greatest Generation Live on Sunday afternoon at 4, where we feature stories from World War II, stories and veterans from World War II. And today we have a really special story, unique as all get out, from Bob Buckler here. And we also have a great connection. We have Lars McKie from Sweden, who is an expert on World War II, especially on what went on in Sweden during World War II and on the American internees, as they were called, in Sweden. So we're going to get, Lars knows a lot about Bob's story, and Bob is an expert at sharing his story. We have a lot of great pictures. But, before we even get started with that, I do want to introduce kind of the youngest person here on the Zoom side. We have Henry Shopke. Henry is from Wisconsin. Hello, Henry. If you want to unmute yourself, you certainly can. And I just want to introduce you to our group here. Henry is 12 years old. He lives in Wisconsin. Hello, Henry. How are you? Good to see you. And Henry has been collecting autographs of World War II veterans. And I kind of held him for ransom. I said, Henry, I think I'm frozen. That's because, it's because I'm using my phone as my camera. And when I get a phone call, my video freezes. So when it stops ringing, my video will be animated again. But until then, you'll just hear my voice. Henry has been collecting World War II veterans autographs. And he said, hey, I'd like to collect, some World War II veterans who would be willing to send autographs. And I said, yes, I do. But you have to come on Greatest Generation Live to connect with them in person. And Henry, I could see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 World War II veterans with us right now. Can I ask you, Henry, what is your interest in collecting these autographs?
Well, I just like collecting. I have a binder where I collect them, so it's I think it's cool, from a historical point, collecting them. I just think it's really cool.
It's really cool. It's really cool, and it's really important. How many have you collected so far?
A lot, probably 50.
50. Whoa, that's terrific, man. And even if you know just a little bit about each one of the people behind those autographs, you're learning a big slice of history. I love that. I love that project. It's just it's a great way to kind of connect with the living history that we have here. And so I will make a special appeal to Bob Buckler and to Calvin Goss and Warren Goss and to Roland Glenn and to Julia Parsons, if they would be willing to sign your, to sign an autograph for you, would be greatly appreciative. Henry, how would you like it to work? Do you want to send them something and then they send it back?
Sure.
Is that how it usually works?
Yeah. Or they can send me something. It doesn't matter.
Or they could just send something. Okay. So I guess here's my question. Do you want me to share your address with them now in the chat or some other time so that they can send you their autographs?
Sure, you can share it in the chat.
Okay. Why don't I do that? Because I think I do have your address, and you could see in the chat if it's correct. All right, here we go. Yeah, several people emailed me about you, Henry. Here we go. All right. Are you a Packers fan?
Yeah.
Okay. We still like you. That's okay. Let's see here. Many of us here are in Pittsburgh, Henry. And we remember when the Packers beat the Steelers in the Super Bowl. All right, here we go. This is Henry's address. If you are Jack Morrow or Julia Parsons or Calvin Goss or Warren Goss or Bob Buckler, why don't you note it down? I will send you the address if you can't, write it down now. If you could send your autograph, maybe a note, and sign it to Henry, who is a 12-year-old student. What grade are you in, Henry?
7th.
7th grade. Wonderful age. If you could send an autograph to Henry, 7th grader Henry in Wisconsin, he would be greatly appreciative, as would I. And if you have any questions, if you can't get the address down from the chat here on the Zoom side, let me know, and I will send it to you offline. Henry, can you stay with us for the rest of the program here?
Yeah.
Okay, because you'll hear a really interesting story. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right. I want to let everybody know that we have an event coming up tomorrow night. It's our happy hour, and it starts at 7 o'clock. It's always a lot of fun, and I'll just share with you what we're doing tomorrow. We're going to have these people on. We're having Brad Washaball back on to talk a little bit more about Beirut in 1983. We're having the very interesting Moni McIntyre, who went from being a Catholic nun to a Navy officer. We have Rob Snyder, who went from being an Iraq Army vet to a children's author who wrote the book, What is a Veteran Anyway? And we have Makia Harper, who did a fascinating documentary about veterans. And so we're going to kind of highlight them tomorrow, but of course it'll be, open conversation. People will be asking questions, sharing stories, and, just having a lot of fun. So please do join us tomorrow for our happy hour at 7. Jim? Yes, Jim.
Steelers win 27-24 in a nail biter.
Steelers win 27-24 in a nail biter. Thank you. And they moved to 6-0. How about that? Wow. So I think that's why we're having some people join us now. So all right. Now that we've settled that, one other thing I want to cover, I've been doing this kind of World War II in the news lately, and something did come up in the news that once again, we talked about the last time we talked about the German bomb that was discovered in Poland in a canal and had to be disposed of. And now one has washed up ashore at Cape Hatteras near the old Cape Hatteras lighthouse. And Buxton, I think that's the town, Buxton, on the Outer Banks. Here it is. It's a small one, a 100-pound bomb. Now, the news story did say that Navy bomb disposal, the Ordnance Explosive Disposal Unit from Norfolk came down and disposed of it in this explosion a couple days later. And in the news said that it was a live 100-pound bomb, which isn't very big, which is small. Definitely a World War II vintage, probably 1942 vintage. And the guess in the article was that it was a practice bomb, but I'm guessing it wasn't. I think most practice bombs were not live. I think they were filled with water or sand. I'm sure there were some had to have been live. I think there was a lot of activity down near Cape Hatteras in World War II. I think this is a result. This is an American attempt to sink one of the German U-boats that was prowling on the Outer Banks off the coast of North Carolina and sinking American ships like crazy. This was called Operation Drumbeat. It was the brainchild of Admiral Karl Donitz, and it was enormously successful the first 6 months of 1942. The Americans were not prepared to send their merchant ships in convoys. They were not prepared to have Navy gunners. They were not prepared to have surveillance of the ocean or any kind of protection. They were using open radio frequencies. And because of that, hundreds and hundreds of American merchant ships, many of them oil tankers, bringing oil up from the Gulf of Mexico to refineries in New Jersey, hundreds and hundreds were sunk right off the coast, all the way from Maine all the way down to Florida and into the Gulf of Mexico, but a huge number right off the coast of North Carolina. And I'm guessing that this bomb that washed up was from an early attempt to sink these U-boats. This Operation Drumbeat, as you can see on the screen, the Germans called it the happy time or the American shooting season, because really a handful of U-boats, and I mean like 6 to 10 to 12, were sinking hundreds of American ships because there was almost no opposition. This was kept quiet at the time. This was censored news. Americans did not know about it until after. But it was absolutely devastating, kind of a second Pearl Harbor. And one of the solutions ended up being, creating convoys, adding Navy gunners to merchant ships, but also employing these people, Civil Air Patrol. The Civil Air Patrol really took advantage of a supply and demand issue. We didn't have enough of an Air Force to really, monitor over the Atlantic Ocean. And U-boat submarines are really susceptible to being spotted from above. They tend to dive if they're spotted. And when they're deep, they can't harm ships. They can only harm ships when they're at the surface or close to the surface. So Civil Air Patrol was really just enlisting the 100,000 private pilots who existed in America and giving them a small stipend, usually just to pay for fuel, to have them go out and patrol the Atlantic Ocean looking for U-boats. And they found them. They found quite a bit. And that's what they were people who were going out in all kinds of weather in small Piper Cubs to look for German U-boats and scare them into kind of diving. These were dangerous missions. About 60 to 70 Civil Air Patrol pilots died doing these patrols in 1942, but they were very successful. And by the summer of 1942, there was an innovation where the Civil Air Patrol added 100-pound bombs to some of these little Piper Cubs. And I love this cartoon because it just, it dramatizes the difficulty that these small planes had, but they could handle 100-pound bombs. And I suspect most of the 100-pound bombs dropped in 1942 were from Civil Air Patrol. And I'm guessing that this bomb that washed up the other day on Cape Hatteras is from that effort. Civil Air Patrol ended up sinking, I think, 10 German U-boats in 1942, which is quite successful for some, civilian pilots to be doing this kind of work. I recently contacted a person who is a member of the Civil Air Patrol who did this service. Her name is Barbara Heinbosch. She lives in Florida. She just turned 100 years old and she just received a Congressional Gold Medal. I emailed her. Somebody gave me her email. I emailed her and said, hey, could you be on Greatest Generation Live? And she said, you know what? I'm too busy. She said she's still involved in her company, her life insurance company. And she said, things are going to ease up after Christmas. Try me then. I said, okay. And then the other person I have not yet contacted, but I absolutely want to contact because she was in the news the other day. Thank you, Nick DeVoe, for alerting me to her, is Millie Bailey, who was a first lieutenant in the WACs, in the Women's Army Corps, one of the first African-American female pilots in the Army. And she just turned 102. And so for her 102nd birthday, she, of course, went skydiving.
Jeez.
That's the kind of person I want to have on Greatest Generation Live for sure. So I'll be looking to get her on. Boy, what a great story. So we have John Kramer with us, do we not, John? Oh, there you are. Hey, John.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm going good.
John, you shared this great story with me by email, and I asked you to come on today to share it with the group because I think it's so interesting. Here, let me get the picture up here of it. There you are. That's you in the Air Force. You were stationed in Germany, among other places. Your career Air Force, so one of the many places you were stationed was Germany. And you told me a story about taking a bike ride down the Mosel River from Koblenz to Trier.
Yes. Yeah, well, I was stationed in Germany 6 years, and one of the things we like to do on time off is me and a buddy of mine would take different bicycle trips. So on this particular trip, we took the train to Koblenz, put our bikes on a train, took the train to Koblenz, and we were bicycling down the Mosel to Trier. It's usually about a 3 or 4 day ride, depending upon how many villages we stop in to sample the wine, because that's, to me, the best wine growing area in Germany. And we would always stay in little private houses. In Germany, if you're in any kind of touristy area, if you saw a little sign out in front of the house that said Zimmer frei, which meant a free room, you would go up, knock on the door, and figure out how much it was going to cost you for the night. So we were on our 3rd day, and we were just north of Trier, and we were pretty tired. And so we decided to stop in this little town. And this is a picture you have of a little house we stopped at. We knocked on the door, and I asked, the lady if she had any free rooms. And she said all the rooms were filled except this small attic room at the very top. There are the 2 little windows that are kind of facing outward. We said, sure, that's great with us. We don't mind sharing that small room. So we went up and got settled in our room, and then went out back to enjoy a bottle of wine. When we went out back, though, there was another, that's my buddy there. We enjoyed more than one bottle of wine. And we went out to the patio, and we were having our bottle of wine, a little bit of cheese. And there was a group of German men at another table. There must have been 6 or 8 of them. They were probably in their late 60s. And they heard us talking English. So one German came over, and I could speak a little bit of German at the time, passable German. He asked me, are we English? Are we Americans? What? And we told him, we're American airmen. We're stationed at Ramstein Air Base. And that's when his face lit up. And he said, you must come join us. I said, wow, we're not sure why you want to come. Well, you come and see here, mein Freundin, my friends. So we went over and sat with them. And in my limited German, I found out that they were all survivors from the Battle of Aachen. And Aachen was a pretty savage battle. It was the first city that the US actually captured in Germany. And these were 6 or, I don't know if it was 6 or 8, I forget that. 6 or 8 of them were there. And they would get together every year, kind of as a little reunion, that they survived this battle. But what was important, what made them so happy that we were there this time, is someone, American GI, I'm thinking it was somebody from the 1st Infantry Division, stole their unit crest or unit emblem. As kind of a war trophy, and took it back to the States. And they had it back in the States for almost 40 years. And the GI was getting old, and he sent it back to the mayor of Aachen. And the mayor of Aachen found this unit and gave it back to the Germans. And they were celebrating because the Americans were so kind to return this unit. My German wasn't good enough to determine if it was a crest or an emblem, but they returned it to them. And then they started buying us wine. And it was 1 bottle, 2 bottles, and ended up being 10 bottles of wine we had in front of us. And needless to say, in military terms, we were kind of shit-faced. But we sat and we sang and danced with them all night long. but we had to get up the next morning and get on our bikes. So we got on our bikes and we started heading down to Trier, and it was like a comedy scene. My buddy was in front of me. He got about 100 yards down the road and he just fell right over on his bike. And we sat there on the curb till noon till we sobered up.
That's a great story. And Aachen was a terrible battle, really a terrible battle. And it was like, you know, as John said, the first city liberated by the Americans in World War II. And it went on longer. It was harder than expected. And there were a great number of Germans killed and Americans killed in that battle. So that's a terrific story. What a memory. John, thank you for coming on and sharing that.
No problem.
I want to highlight our special guest of the afternoon, who is Bob Buckler. Hello, Bob. How are you?
I'm fine. Wait till you get to me.
Thank you for coming on today, Bob. And I want to thank your son, Jack, and Janet for making it possible for you to come on and join us. It's special to have you. You have a unique story, a story that I've never heard from anyone else. And I thought you would share it with us today. I do have your pictures. So for example, I'm going to share, let's see, one of your early, look at that. That's you. When was that taken?
That was taken in Sweden. I was 19 years old.
That was taken in Sweden. Okay. So why did you join the Air Corps to begin with? How did that work?
Well, I grew up in Lawrenceville, and in my senior year, I went to Peabody High School. In my senior year, my family moved out to Shaler Township. That was in my senior year. I went to Shaler High School for 2 months. I was new around there, and I didn't have any friends or anything, and I had another buddy that we lived together, and he and I joined the Army. And when you join the Army, you can pick out what branch of service you'd like to be in. So he and I decided we'd like to be in the Air Corps.
Now, did you have the idea that you might be a pilot or something, or you just wanted the Air Corps?
I was 18 at the time. And I just wanted to get out of high school.
Get out of Shaler. That's what you wanted. Yeah.
Right. Well, I didn't know anybody.
Right. And so where did they send you for training?
Well, when I went in and volunteered for the Air Corps, they says, "Do you think you'd like to fly?" And I says, "Well, that sounds good to me." He says, "I'll tell you what." He says, "If you want to fly, we need gunners. You go to gunnery school for 6 weeks, and graduate, you come out a sergeant." And I thought, what? 6 weeks of gunnery school, I come out a sergeant. I'd had cousins in there for over a year. They were still privates.
Right.
So they sent us volunteers up to Atlantic City for our basic training. We stayed in a hotel in Atlantic City, and we did our basic training on the boardwalk, and you wasn't allowed to be in step. So we were up there for a few months, and we stayed in one of the hotels on the boardwalk, and then at night we'd get out and stay and visit some of the piers up there. They let all the GIs in for free.
So that's a pretty good place to do training.
I'll say, you just didn't learn to march.
And then where did you do your gunnery training?
I did my gunnery training in Laredo, Texas. And then Laredo, Texas was right on the border of Mexico. And at night we could walk into town, and you could walk across the border into Mexico. Then for $1, you could go over there and get all you wanted to drink and eat. So then after we finished gunnery school, they sent us up to, well, anyway, up to a nursing, another base where you stayed till they found a place to put you.
Right.
They sent us back to Texas at an airport down there, formed a crew. There's 10 of us on a B-17 crew. And as you walked in, he says, where do you want to be stationed? What part of the plane do you want to be stationed on? I says, well, I weighed about 125 pounds then. I says, I think I'd like to be a tail gunner. Well, as you come in the base there, whatever you'd like to be, that's where they put you. So we formed our group there, and formed all the pilot, co-pilot. Oh, there's the picture.
There you are.
That's what we got together, and we formed that group, and that's the one we got together and flew over to Germany.
So you flew this plane from Texas to England.
Well, no, we flew that plane to practice with here in the States to get to know each other.
Okay.
And then we flew up to Nebraska to pick up a brand new B-17. And we flew in that for a couple of weeks. And then they sent us over to Germany, over to England in it. And there was several of our group that we were trained with here in the States. We all flew up to Newfoundland. And then from Newfoundland, we landed in Ireland, and then from Ireland over to England.
And was that plane? Was that plane this plane, Glory Girl?
That was Glory Girl. Now, you flew 25 missions. They sent you home. We flew 22 missions in Glory Girl. We got all shot up over Frankfurt. We didn't know whether it was going to make it back to England or not. But the closer to the channel we got, the Spitfires come and chase the German fighters away from us.
Mm.
We were going over the channel. We were flying on 2 engines. The pilot says, I don't know if we'll make it to England, but we'll see what happens. The Spitfires come and told them to would follow them to take us to the closest airport in England. By the time we got close to the base in England, we were flying on 1 engine.
Mm.
Well, we kept losing altitude. And the pilot says, we might make it. Well, we made it. We just made it to the runway. Landed with 1 engine going. And that was the last time we seen that plane.
It's amazing that a B-17 would be sturdy and durable enough to make it in 1 engine. I mean, that happened quite frequently, that 1 engine was enough to get you home. And
well, the B-17s could take a hell of a beating.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the first time it was shot up pretty bad, but this is the first time I ever landed with 1 engine going. And we kept losing altitude, but we made it.
Bob, can I ask you if you could remember what it felt like to go on one of these, like your first mission? Was it, it's one thing to train for it. It's another thing to actually go on a mission and be shot at. Do you remember your first experience, the first mission?
Well, yeah. First mission, we were bombing a factory in Germany. They were making ball bearings. And the first 3 missions or so, we were bombing ball bearing factories because they claim that they lose their ball bearing factories. They're not going to be able to replace them with the chain or with planes that come back all shot up and things.
Right.
But the more missions you got on and more experience you got.
Boy,
I carried 600 shells, and I ran out of shells already.
Boy, you had 600 shells in that machine gun of yours in the tail.
Right.
Mm. Did
That was
you?
that was the last time that plane flew.
Yeah, that was the last time. Okay, so that grounded Glory Girl, which meant you had to switch planes, right?
Well, we landed in England and they had to send a plane down to this airport to pick us up.
Oh, by the
Yeah.
way, here's a great picture. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Bob, but here's a great picture of. I think this is you with
That's me.
with your Glory Girl
Right,
bomber jacket.
right. And that's a picture of me in Sweden with my jacket.
It's so great. That is so great. That is a great photograph. You don't happen to still have that jacket, do you?
It's wore out.
And I only bring it up because I found this on eBay. This is your next plane, Vini Vidi Vici
Right.
authentic jacket, selling for $3,000. If Jack really loved you, he'd buy one of these for you, Bob.
Well, a few months ago, you had me go to the Carnegie Science Center,
Yes.
and they had a picture of that jacket and my jacket alongside each other at the intermission of the show. And I've been trying to find out if this Vini Vici fellow that owned that was still around.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder. You don't know. You don't know if who that jacket came from.
Well, no, I don't. But it was on display at the show that was going there.
Right.
During intermission.
Right.
And the thing of it is, that was the first time we flew Vini Vici, and that was the last time it flew until it was fixed up and they sold it to the Swedes.
Yes. Tell us about this mission, this Vini Vidi Vici mission, the one that you went on, your 23rd mission.
Yeah, that was our last mission. We didn't have a plane. We got back to our base, and this plane had been sitting around for a while, had like 30 missions on it. And they gave it to us to fly to Poland. Longest mission we were ever on. It was a 13-hour mission.
13 hours.
Right.
Oh.
So I say it had about 30 missions on it. We got it to Sweden. Our engineer went down to Stockholm and helped put the engines back in shape for the Swedes. And then they sold it to the Swedes for $1.
Right.
When we got to Sweden, though, we found out that when we landed in Sweden, if you took refuge in a neutral country in time of war, you're supposed to stay there till the war's over.
So what happened to the, how badly were the engines shot up on that mission?
The engine wasn't shot up too bad, but it was such a long mission. We had 2 bomb bays. One bomb bay was filled with bombs. The other bomb bay had an extra 500-gallon gas tank in it. And we got shot up over Posen, Poland. We were bombing an aircraft engine factory where the Germans were building jet engines. And at the time, we didn't know what a jet engine was.
Right.
But we got shot up there, and we were losing gasoline so fast that we wasn't going to make it back to England. And between the navigator and the bombardier, the navigator, and the pilot, they decided to try to make it to Sweden.
Which was a neutral country at the time.
Neutral country.
Could you tell us about your arrival in Sweden? What was that like?
Well, the pilot decided to try and head for Sweden. Wasn't going to make it back to England. And we were being chased by a couple German fighters. And they decided that there was a cloud cover below us. The navigator says, head for those clouds. Now we can lose these fighters. Which we headed for clouds. We flew about a half hour or so. The navigator says, well, we better get below the clouds to find out where the hell we were. And we were flying, coming out of the east, and we were getting close to shore, and some Swedish ships were shooting at us. We couldn't go back. We had to find a place to land. We couldn't figure out why they were shooting at us. And we landed there. As soon as we landed, we were surprised, and we were surrounded by the Swedish army. Well, they started yakking at us, and we were yakking at them, and we didn't understand them. They didn't understand us. But anyway, they held us like prisoners, and I kept trying to tell them to keep their army out of the airplane because we had 12 50 caliber machine guns there, and they're all loaded. If they just press the trigger any one of them, they're going to be shooting themselves. But they didn't understand what I was trying to tell them. Then about a half hour later, here comes a couple Swedish officers up. And our pilot started talking to them, they could understand English. So they left my partner and I in the discharge all the machine guns there.
I want to bring in Lars right now. Lars, are you still with us here?
Absolutely. I'm listening.
Okay, very good, Lars. This is Lars McKie. He's from Sweden. He knows a lot about this flight and a lot about this airplane, and he's been joining us on Facebook Live on our events. And I asked him to come with us today to talk a little bit about what he knows about Bob's mission and the fate of the VBC. And before Lars does say that, I do want to talk very briefly, and I know very little about it. Lars knows a whole lot about it, about Sweden's neutrality in World War II. Sweden is often, or not often, Sweden was famously criticized by Winston Churchill in his memoirs of World War II as a country that kind of played both sides, profited from the war by selling ore and steel and ball bearings to Germany, and then importing, I think, coal from Germany, and while also kind of playing, helping the Allies out also. And I think that criticism is unfair. Every once in a while, you'll still read about it. Neutrality in war is not a moral position. It's a political strategy. And in Sweden's case, it was a political strategy for survival. I will simply share with you this map. All the countries in red are all German occupied. So you see Sweden here, the countries in green are the neutral countries. You see Sweden is completely surrounded by, German controlled or aligned nations. They were this far from being invaded by Germany. Neutrality was their strategy for protecting their sovereignty during the war. And certainly they did trade with Germany, but they had to. But they also did a lot of intelligence work for the Allies. Lars knows a whole lot more than I do about this. And of course, also was a place of refuge for refugees from Denmark and Norway, and Jews who were interned in camps on the continent. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. But Sweden was, although they were a neutral country, they were very involved in the war. Lars, would you say that was a fair characterization?
I would, yeah. I mean, it sounds very, very accurate. I mean, Sweden, to explain Sweden and its position in the war would take at least 2 sessions, at least.
Yeah, it's complicated.
Question,
it's
but
really complicated. Yes.
It is. But I mean, just as one comparison, you can take, how did Greece get pulled into the war? Well, they said no to Mussolini, who wanted to move troops through Greece. And that's how they got pulled into the war. They were also neutral at the beginning.
Right.
So exactly the same thing for Sweden in a way.
Right.
I think Sweden moved a lot of German troops through our territory between Norway and Finland at the beginning of the war. So
Lars is a veteran of the Swedish Air Force. He's also in the Swedish Home Guard, which is kind of like, I think, our equivalent to our National Guard here in the United States. I asked him about his name. Lars, clearly Swedish. McKie, clearly Scottish.
yeah, that's correct. My Scottish father and Swedish mother.
Okay.
Simple as that.
Mixed marriage. All right, very good. And your English is superb, and that's because of your father?
Well, partially, yes. I've started talking. I mean, he knows like 5 words in Swedish. So in order to communicate with him from a young age, you need to speak English. Also, it's I mean, Sweden, we're pretty multilingual here when it comes to English.
Yes. Yes, you are. Yeah. Yeah. Swedes know English far better than Americans know Swedish. That's for sure. Tell us a little bit about the planes like Bob's Veni Vidi Vici that ditched in Sweden during World War II.
Yeah, I mean, as the air campaigns picked up in I guess the later part of 43 and then early part of 44, you had a lot more airplanes diverting into Sweden's, just like Mr. Buckler just explained. I think through the war between July 43 and May 45, there were about 139 American airplanes that came into Sweden alone. So, and like 68 of them were B-17s. So that's a pretty high number for.
That's a high number, and that would translate into well over 1,000, well over 1,500 American airmen there in Sweden.
Yeah, I've tried to find an exact number. I've got like 1,600 ish of total American airmen alone processed through Sweden through the war. It doesn't equate up to a crew of 10 in each B-17, for example, but yeah, that's quite a lot.
Well, did you ever see a book that was written by an Englishman that says "Making It for Sweden"?
I have not read that.
Well, I got it right here, and I let Todd take pictures of it for this interview.
Oh, cool.
Yes.
I got to read that then. Absolutely.
We landed in Sweden in February of 44.
Yeah,
February
And,
44. Put that on your reading list, Lars.
absolutely. Top of my list.
We're looking at a map here. Can you tell us what we're looking at?
Well, yeah, you're looking at obviously Sweden, Norway, and the northern part of United Kingdom and Denmark. This is just basically a map to show what Sweden was up to in a way in like 40 from 42 and onwards. The strictly neutral Sweden was operating a Curl line into United Kingdom as an example, flying from Bromma in Stockholm with DC-3s into Aberdeen in Scotland. And you mentioned ball bearings that we sold to the Germans. We also sold that to Churchill,
Mm-hmm.
to the Allies. So that was part of the goods that were shipped in there. What you're looking at here is well, in 43, we had 2 of these DC-3s were lost actually in 43. One was presumed to be shot down. That's the orange cross there. The red cross is another one that was actually confirmed to be shot down by a Junkers 88 in, was it October 43?
Mm-hmm.
And later, actually in 51, they confirmed that the other one was actually shot down by the Germans. So as you can see, operating in that courier line, you had to take a flight path right between Norway and Denmark, which at the time was occupied by Germany. And
Right.
so you could be reached by Luftwaffe very easily coming through that area. So yeah, so what they tried to do, what they did do is actually they ceased that operation due to the fact that they needed to have a safer route. And that's, I guess I just printed that blue line that you're looking at. That's a northern route, which was the longer but safer route into UK. The problem with that longer, route was that it was too long for a DC-3 to operate, so they needed a long-range aircraft.
Got it.
So that's really how we started to, in a way, come looking at for B-17s, as Mr. Buckler indicated, that we bought them.
So B-17s could go farther than
Longer range than a DC-3.
Longer range than DC-3. Okay. And who is Felix Hardison?
Well, that was a U.S. Air Attaché, Colonel Felix Hardison. He was a newly appointed one in early 44. He came to Sweden. He's actually a B-17 bomb pilot himself, a distinguished one at that as well. He earned a Distinguished Service Cross for a bombing mission in 42 off of New Guinea, where he bombed 2 Japanese light cruisers. So he was kind of, he was well acquainted with the capabilities of the B-17. So he started talking, of course, with the Swedes, and they came up with a solution to 2 problems. And number one was that we would exchange the release. In exchange for the release of about 300 interned airmen, Sweden could take delivery of about 9 B-17s that was already in Sweden. So that's how we started to look for these B-17s.
So that's interesting. So in exchange for the B-17s that kind of, ditched and landed in Sweden, Sweden was willing to release the American internees.
Correct. Early in the war, it was done on a 1-for-1 basis with the Germans. I mean, 1 Allied pilot for 1 German pilot.
Right.
But obviously, as the campaigns and then, as the war progressed, the number of Allied airmen was vastly outnumbering the Germans. So they had to come up with other solutions. And obviously, here we had a problem because we needed to take that longer northern route.
Right.
Long range capable.
Oh, that's so interesting. That's so interesting.
I got to tell you about our pilot. He was exchanged for a German pilot that landed in Sweden. He was only in Sweden. He was only in Sweden for about 4 months, and they exchanged him for a German pilot. When he got back to England, he didn't break international law. He got to finish his missions. He only had a couple more missions to go. But when they brought us back, we got back to U.S. for Christmas in 1944.
So
our crew was at the summer and winter resort up on Lake Cillian. And we stayed in the summer and winter resort, and we skied all winter and had sailboats, things like that in the summer.
Bob, was that? I have a question about that pilot. First of all, was he? And you will explain in detail what your life in Sweden was like as an internee, and it was a pretty nice life. What was the pilot upset that he was traded?
Well, a German pilot landed, and they exchanged the German pilot for our pilot. But our pilot didn't break international law, so he could get back and finish his missions.
I don't get it. Why was that? Because I thought that if you landed in Sweden and then were released, you could not fight anymore.
That's right. But if they exchange one for the other, then each one could go back and fight.
Got it. Okay, that's good. Thank you for
no
clarifying that.
No, we stayed there from February till the 1st of December. And they paid all our expenses at the summer and winter resort, at the hotel. And they always sent somebody up to pay us every month. And then in the end of November, fella come up, says, I got some good news and bad news for you. I says, what's that? He says, this is your last paycheck you're getting here. You pack your clothes, you're leaving tomorrow. Now, the kids over there thought it was Christmas come early because we had all these toys and things we had to give away that day. The next morning, they come in with a bus, took us down near Stockholm, put us on an airplane, brought us back to the United States. Then they told us we broke international law, taking refuge in a neutral country and leaving there before the war was over. Then they told us we weren't allowed to leave the country again. So they says, ask us where we lived. I told them Pittsburgh. He says, where do you want to be stationed? I says, closest place to Pittsburgh. So they sent me to Columbus, Ohio. And the officer in charge says, no, I'll give you a pass good for Pittsburgh. I want you to be here on Mondays and you can leave Fridays. So I used to thumb my way home every weekend. And then I often wondered if I could have sued the government from them making me break international law. Because we had it so nice in Sweden compared to what we have back in the States.
Yes. And I do want to, Ben Wright suggested, I think he's absolutely right, to show this map again and to show here was your target in Poland. And if you're
Posen, Poland.
Posen, Poland.
Right.
And if you're hit here in Poland, look how far you have to go to try and make it back to England. And there's the only other place you could possibly go, apart from trying to make it all the way back to England, would be this neutral country of Sweden, which is just right across the Baltic Sea here. Sweden is just surrounded by German-occupied territory. There was nowhere else that was safe to land or to fly. So that really was your planes and your crew's only option. Bob, I do want you to say a little bit more about your capture, your initial capture. Were you scared when you were, did you know what was going to happen to you? I mean, because they treated you kind of like a prisoner, right? At first.
Yes. Well, when we landed, we didn't know whether we were landing in Sweden or Denmark because they were shooting at us from the Baltic Sea there. And we wasn't able to do anything except land. But then the Swedes, they couldn't understand what we were saying. We didn't know what they were saying until a couple of Swedish officers came and they found out what we were going. But they told us the Swedes were shooting at us because they thought we were Russians and they hated the Russians.
Did they disarm you when you landed?
Well, we had to get them off the plane so we could disarm all the guns we had on there.
Right.
But then we found out later that they hated the Swedes, hated the Russians. And they thought we were coming from Russia.
And then where did they take you?
Well, first thing they had to do was made us take a shower. They didn't want us bringing any diseases in. And we all had these heavy flying suits on.
Mm-hmm.
And they told us we had to take a shower first thing. So we go up and they had a shower building. They took us down the shower building. We started taking our heavy jackets off and hanging them up on the hangers. And then we had 45 caliber pistols strung over our shoulders. And we started taking them off and hanging them up on the walls. And the guards started screaming and hollering. And there we were for 2 or 3 hours. We all had 45s on us. Well, then the next morning, they took us in at Stockholm to a department store, and they says, "Now, you gotta get civilian clothes." Says you're allowed to spend $300 for your winter clothes, which they did.
That's a lot of money in those days.
Yeah, that was a lot of money in those days. And then they says, don't forget to save enough money to buy suitcases. So we got the suitcases. Then they took us to breakfast. We all had civilian clothes on. And then they told us they were sending us up to Rättvik, Sweden, which was on Lake Siljan. And they gave us a pilot, one of their pilots, who could speak English and take us up there and get us all acquainted. So we got up to this town called Rättvik, and the train station was right alongside the hotel. And they said, now, when you get up there, you'll meet another American group that's staying at the hotel. We get up there and we get off the train, and there's a bunch of GIs there, and we had trained with them here in the States. They were happy to see us as we were to see them. But anyway, when we got back to the United States, and they told us we broke international law, wasn't allowed to leave the country again. And this was in December '44. And that's when we decided whether we could sue the government and make them breaking international law.
Well, in February '44, when you just arrived and you went to the department store, they took you to Stockholm to buy, civilian clothes, which I take it were like tie and jacket and
suit coats.
Suit coats.
Oh, they had to wear a suit coat to go to dinner at night.
So where were you interned? What hotel was it?
Tourist Hotel Inn in Rättvik, Sweden.
Okay, and it was like a resort.
It was a resort. Now, this was in the wintertime, and a lot of the wealthy Swedes sent their daughters up to meet the Americans. And there was quite a few of them. You get new ones coming in every week.
New girls.
I can imagine that was probably a highlight of your stay in Sweden.
Oh, I'll say.
So
Sweden was like a different country too. In the wintertime, we'd go skiing every day. And there'd always be a Swedish officer to take us skiing through the woods and stuff, and teach the ones that didn't know how to ski. Then you'd come back to the hotel that night, and first thing you want to do is take a shower and get dressed up for dinner. And then when they had dinner, they played dinner music. Then after dinner, you went and they played dancing music. And you didn't have a shower in your room or bathtub. You had to make arrangements to go to their bathhouse and get a bath. And they'd say, well, we'll call you when your water's ready. So in about a half hour or so, they'd call you up, your water's ready. And then they'd say, now you feel the water, see if it's hot or cold, or see if it's all right for you. And I says, no, that's fine. Well, you'd get undressed, you get in the bathtub, and then they want to give you a bath.
Carol Poptruck wrote in the
139 American bombers come in.
Lars, can you repeat that? Because I think you're exactly right.
Yeah, I just said, no wonder we had 139 American airplanes come in.
Yeah.
Through the war.
Yeah.
The war's not out.
Carol Poptruck wrote, war is hell in Sweden. You took it for the team there, Bob.
Well, that's right. We didn't want to leave.
And you told me the king of Sweden met you?
Well, the Prince of Sweden was in charge of all the Americans. And he was married to an American girl. She was from a wealthy family in New York City. So you can imagine how we got treated. But this was just a little town we were in. There must have been about 3 or 4 different B-17 groups in that town. But there was hundreds of planes landed in Sweden, even when we were there. but nobody could believe how well we had it.
And so in the winter you skied, what'd you do in the summer?
Well, we were on a big lake, Lake Cillian, and we had sailboats and canoes, and we did a lot of fishing. And seems like everybody in Sweden had relatives in the United States.
Yes.
They treated us like long lost cousins.
Isn't that great? Because about 100 or about 1 million, I would say, Swedes immigrated in the 1880s, 1890s, 1900s. Yeah, right. That is so. what a saga. What a saga. And I want to go back to Lars, because Lars does have this great story about the fate of your airplane. Lars, I'm going to share some pictures here. Here we go.
So WWII, Mr. Buckler, you said you didn't think that she took flight again after you came into Sweden, right?
Well, no.
Well,
Our engineer on our plane, they had him come down and work on the engine, and then later on they sold that plane to the Swedes.
yeah. Yeah, she was part of a 9 aircrafts that we purchased from United States for $1 each.
Yeah.
To be converted to obviously to the passenger airliner to take 14 passengers and 4 crew. These pictures that you're looking at right now is actually WWII at Saab Airfield somewhere in late 44. Obviously, since there's snow on the ground. As a fun fact, I'm less than 5 miles away from that picture where that picture is taken.
Well, that's where we landed.
That's Saab Airfield in Linköping, where she was converted to a passenger airliner.
Well, they used that when they first bought it. They used it to fly up in northern Sweden and places for mapping the country, from what I understand.
Well,
and then they were using it to draw maps of their country. But
well, we did another interesting thing as well. Sila, which is the forerunner of SAS, the Scandinavian Airlines, they actually, in 1945, June 27th, we operated Europe's first and Sweden's first transatlantic flight to North America. It was a 2-stage hop. It was at Stockholm Bromma to New York LaGuardia on the 27th of June 1945. It was with a stop in Keflavik, Iceland, and then in another place in Labrador, Canada. So, and the plane that was used to do that was actually WWII.
Yeah.
Whoa. So the WWII, the plane that Bob, landed in Sweden, sold to Sweden, converted into a passenger plane that we're looking at right now. It's hard to imagine a B-17 being a passenger plane and what that took. But then that plane becomes the first Swedish plane to cross the Atlantic Ocean and land in North America.
Correct. And this is WWII at LaGuardia. And if you see your old office, Mr. Buckler, there's still you can still see that the plexiglass or the glass is still there.
Oh, yeah.
And part of the conversion that they did, they left the tail section very untouched.
Yeah.
They left the entrance and the plexiglass as is, because that's those windows have been seen quite a lot from your office.
Yeah. And you found a wonderful magazine article about this in Swedish, and I just want to show this picture here in the lower right. This is what it looks like on that airplane inside after it's been converted to a passenger plane. It held, what did you say, 14 passengers?
14 passengers and 4 crew.
Oh, man.
Now, first time into LaGuardia, she flew only with the crew. So there were no passengers on it at that time.
Right. Oh, how interesting.
B-17 Felix has made about 66 crossings before she was replaced. Not her, but the B-17s in general did 66 crossings before she was. They were replaced by DC-4s.
And
And
here
this
are
is Vinny Vici on LaGuardia again, actually on the inaugural flight.
Oh, how great. And
I'll
and
tell
you,
you,
yeah, Bob.
I was gonna say, when they told us they were pack our clothes, we were leaving, they took us down, they picked us up in a bus, took us down to Stockholm and brought a B-24 in that didn't have any fire protection in it and didn't have any parachutes. And they put our crew on one side of the plane and they brought a bunch of Norwegians in that sat on the other side of the plane. They were all young fellas. We found out that they were flying back to Scotland to join the Norwegian army. So they get back.
Operation Sonny.
Yeah.
That was part of Operation Sonny.
Okay.
Yeah, the so-called, well, the strictly neutral Sweden, who were allowing repatriations of American aircraft through B-24 Liberators.
Yeah.
But it was a strange situation.
Yeah.
Very strange. And again, I want to share this great magazine pictures here of that first trip to LaGuardia on what had been the Vinny Vici. And you could see that the Swedes took those 9 B-17s, converted them into passenger planes, and each gave them an American name. So the Vinny Vici became Jim. Is that right, Lars? Is that how it worked?
That's correct. It's correct. And the type, the civilian B-17 were actually given a type designation called Felix. So in Swedish, they're called Felixes, B-17 Felix. And obviously, in honor of the U.S. Air Attaché, Felix Hardison, of course.
Isn't that great? Now, what is this a picture of?
This is the a DC-3.
Okay.
It's one of the ones that were actually shot down in 43.
Okay.
Maybe we should talk about Tom.
Tom.
Yeah, if you go back.
Okay. Oh, and by the way, here's Jim. You see Jim written on the tail.
Yep.
Oh,
Right there.
yeah.
And right here is circled, you said that plexiglass?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's Mr. Buckler's office.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I weighed about 125 pounds.
if you, yeah, this is, next one. You just passed it, Todd.
Okay, I passed it. Okay.
There you
This
go.
one.
Stop. There you go. So obviously this is Glory Girl, right, Mr. Buckler?
I can't really tell.
Okay, so tail
Same-
number 31163.
Yeah, same tail number as Glory Girl, Bob.
Oh, okay.
So I believe this picture is taken on Rinkaby Airfield somewhere in 44. This is
That's-
taken in Sweden.
That's where we landed in
Yeah,
Rinkeby.
and if you go to the next picture, Todd,
Yeah.
you can see this is also Glory Girl in the foreground, and in the background you can see something else.
Oh,
It's the tail number 30661, which is the Veni Vidi Vici. So basically
Oh.
what you got here is the picture of Glory Girl in the foreground and Veni Vidi
Okay.
Vici in the background.
no, if that's Glory Girl, I had my girlfriend's name printed on the back, and her nickname was Porky.
Todd,
Hey,
We
that's
got it.
home run, a grand slam, Lars.
yeah, there you go.
We have been
So take the
wondering
next
about
picture.
this.
Take the next picture then.
That was my wife's
There
nickname,
you go.
Porky. Look, yes, it is. Look.
This is hilarious because Lars and I were just talking about, I wonder what that says. We can't quite make that out. I wonder what that says. Because we found it kind of a remarkable coincidence that both B-17s that you served on ended up landing in Sweden. I'm not saying that there's a conspiracy here that you somehow rigged it to happen to both, but
I never did find out what happened to Glory Girl.
You never
She
did find out?
actually, yeah,
No.
she was part of a mission on March 6, 1944, Mr. Buckler.
Oh,
Yeah, with a with a less experienced crew as yours. I don't have the full details, but she diverted after being hit over Berlin and diverted and actually landed on the same airfield as you did on March 6th. And in the report, when they interviewed the crew, they actually do mention that First Lieutenant Montgomery, who was the pilot, your pilot, I guess,
yeah.
actually flew that other plane that came in, which was the 311-63 Glory Girl. So it's just a strange coincidence. And it gets even better, Mr. Buckler, because Glory Girl is actually part of the 7 that was converted to passenger airlines.
Oh,
So she got flying again. I don't know much about what she did in the line of service for us, what she did. I do know, however, that unfortunately, December 4th, 1945, she suffers a crash, and all 6 on board actually dies. So, but she continued to fly. That's for sure.
that Glory Girl was a brand new plane. We picked it up in the States and flew it over to London, England. And on the 22nd mission, that was the last time we flew it.
Yeah. Well, they must have fixed her up in the UK then, and then threw her out once more.
They must have. They
Yeah.
must have.
Yeah.
What a coincidence.
You even left my wife's nickname on there.
So your wife's nickname, and she was your girlfriend at the time?
Yeah,
And her nickname was Porky.
right.
Do you know what would happen to me if I nicknamed my wife Porky? I wouldn't be sitting here right now. He has
It's
no
astonishing
comment.
to see what they're doing in the pictures. The 2 men on the left is actually removing the guns, and
Oh.
I hope they didn't shoot themselves then.
How about that? Boy, is that interesting. We solved the mystery. So you wrote Porky on the back of that plane. That is absolutely amazing. So, Bob, how disappointed were you when they told you that you had to leave Sweden?
Well, when they told us we had to leave, I thought we were going to have to go back and fly again. They didn't tell us we broke international law until they brought us back to the States.
Wow. Hey, I want to invite anybody here, either on the Facebook side or on the Zoom side, to unmute yourself here on the Zoom side and ask Bob a question if you'd like, or Lars, or put it in the chat. Yes, Roland.
Bob, I was wondering, can we tell from the photograph where the rear gunner's compartment is located, and what was it like to be in that compartment? Can we see where that compartment is?
Let's
Well-
see if I could get a good shot here, Roland. And I will search for a shot. And in the meantime, Bob, yeah, if you could tell us, what is it like to be in that tail, on a long mission?
Well, I weighed about 125 pounds, and I had to crawl back from the middle of the ship back to the tail section. And he kept busy all the time you were back there, looking for fighters and all that stuff, and talking to other people on the plane over the intercom. So you didn't have time to think of anything else.
Mm. And so you're pretty busy. It's you're really focused, I guess, on your job. I'm going to try and share a picture here. A couple pictures. Are you so busy that you're too busy to be scared?
I think so.
Really? Okay.
I was 19 then, and I had my 20th birthday in Sweden,
Oh, man.
and I even had to go to the girlfriend's house to have a birthday party.
In the meantime, I have a question, if I may.
Sure.
You said that the Swedes fired upon you on the Veni Vidi Vici, Mr. Buckler. Did they hit you?
The ships were in the water, were shooting
Yeah.
up at us.
Did they hit?
Not that I know of,
Okay.
because we were all looking for a place to land.
Yeah, because there are reports of them, Swedish anti-aircraft actually seeing that flying fortress and firing upon it. But then the same aircraft is seen circling Rinkaby airfield, firing flares, and then doing a forced landing.
Well, whenever time we come back from a mission and we needed help, our engineer was in the top turret, and if we had to land, he'd start shooting red flares in the air so we could land first. And when we landed in Sweden, they told us, well, red flares didn't mean anything to them. We should have been shooting white flares.
I'm sharing a picture here of the tailgun position on a B-17. Is this kind of what it looked like, Bob?
Oh, yeah.
And you said your longest mission was 13 hours.
Yeah. Now, they went to bomb Posen again. This was after we were in Sweden. And they didn't make it back to England. They bombed Poland and went straight into Russia rather than try to make that long trip.
And here's another shot of the interior position. So this is where you would be strapped in.
Right. That little seat there, that's where I'd sit on and then I'd be kneeling.
Yep.
On those little pads. And you're in that position from the time you went on the mission till you got back.
You're kneeling, sitting on you're kneeling, sitting on
You'd be sitting on that little stool there, and you'd be kneeling. You'd be sitting there for most of our missions for 10 hours, and you'd be in that position for 10 hours.
After I've read, Bob, that after a mission you'd land, would they give you a shot of whiskey?
Well, not till I got off the plane.
Not till you got off the plane. Yeah.
Well, would land, and as soon as you land, you got out of the plane, the truck would come up with a couple of women on, and they'd say, "What would you like to drink? Hot tea, coffee, or scotch?" Well, they never ran out of coffee or tea.
Brad Washabaugh asks, was there armor plating to protect the gunner?
No. The only armament plating there is the glass that you looked out of. That was supposed to deflect any shots and stuff.
Boy, oh boy.
And the big problem too is most of our missions were at 25,000 feet. Average temperature is around 50 below zero. And the big problem you're worried about is losing power back there because you had electric suits, electric shoes, gloves, hats, and you're always afraid of losing your power and freezing to death.
And you would literally freeze to death back there if you didn't have those electric suits that you plugged in when you came into the plane, right?
Right.
And that kept you warm enough.
Yeah.
Oh boy, oh boy.
But I'll tell you another little story though. You sat in that position all that time, and if you had to go to the pot, they had little hoses in there with and if you're the first one to use these hoses, you were fine. But if you're the second one to use it, you got it all over you.
The indignities of war.
Well, they gave us Well, of course, we for flying, most of the missions are like 10 hours, and they gave you a lunch. And they also gave you a thermos full of coffee. You had to drink that coffee and eat that sandwich before you got to altitude. Otherwise, it was all frozen. You couldn't-
Boy, it would freeze that quickly.
Oh, yeah.
Was there ever a time when you thought that you would not live to see your 25th mission?
No,
You never doubted it.
I never thought about it. You're just worried about getting back from the one you were on.
Boy, something else. Ken Rozicki asks, as a tail gunner, were you sitting or lying down as you manned the weapon? It looks like you were sitting.
You were sitting on that little seat there.
With your kind of on your knees. You're kind of
So you're on your knees and your ass was on that little seat.
right, like this. So the knees, your knees
Yeah.
were here. You
Yeah.
were sitting there, and you were. So we're looking out the back of the plane,
Yeah.
and your arms would go around that metal plate.
Right. And now there was 250 caliber machines back there, machine guns. So yeah, each hand is on the triggers.
Each hand is on the triggers.
Yeah.
Did you know? Were you ever able to tell if you hit anything, hit an enemy plane?
Well, we flew in groups, and you could hear one group talking to the other. Here comes a plane at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, and you're looking all the time. And there was 9 of us in a group, so there was 18 of us shooting at the same plane coming in from the ass.
Right.
And you're always busy.
Yeah.
You know, the odd part of it is when we trained in the United States, and you shot armor-piercing shells, and the back of the shells put out a fire that you could see where the shells were going. Now, that looked great when we were training back in the United States. On about our third mission in England, they took all our tracers off us because when you shot, you all you seen was that tracer going out, and you weren't aiming at the plane anymore. And they took all our tracers off us after about the third mission.
Mm. Ken Rozicki asks, and also Lars did too, on such a long mission, after such a long mission, are you able to kind of move around? I mean, how would you unfold yourself? You
did. You just kept watching, see what's going on. And the big thing about the tailgunner, he was one of the few people seen where the bombs hit.
Mm-hmm.
And you could tell whether they hit targets or not. And not only that, if another B-17 got hit, was going down, you had to count the shoots that come out of the plane.
That's right. And then
you had other things to do.
So you would be debriefed after every mission about what you saw. Did the bombs hit the targets? Did any other planes around you get hit? That kind of thing.
Yeah. And you had to, if you seen a plane going down, you had to count the shoots that come out of it.
Mm. Brad Washaball asks a great question. Were you trained to be able to assume other gunners' positions?
No, I was a tail gunner.
Okay. So if the waist gunner got shot, you weren't going to move into that position.
Oh no.
Right. Okay.
But the tail gunners always had plenty to do besides shoot.
Yeah. Nick DeVoe asked, statistically, which gunner position on a B-17 suffered the highest casualties? Now, I do happen to know that the navigator and bombardiers in the nose of the plane got hit the most often. Hello.
That's my great grandson.
great grandson. You have a wonderful great grandfather. Do you know that? You look just like him.
Listen,
I have a lot more hair.
That's true. Oh man. Yeah, Nick, do you have any idea about which positions? I would imagine that I don't either. I know that the nose of the plane was most vulnerable, and that was navigator bombardier. But as far as the gunner positions, I don't know.
well, when you've got in a group, your first position in that group was at the ass end of the group. And the more flights you went on, the closer up front you got.
So,
Because
so you're saying, Bob, sorry to interrupt you, but you're saying that when you first flew on your first mission, you would get the position called tail end Charlie,
right,
which was the most vulnerable position in a squadron heading out in a big,
Right.
squadron to do a bombing raid, because you'd be what's the word? Accessible, vulnerable.
yeah, vulnerable, yeah.
You'd be vulnerable in the back, not protected.
Mhm.
And as your missions went on, you were able to move
You
your
kept working
position.
up front. And of course, we were, the last couple of missions we flew, our pilot was next to being the lead plane,
Oh, wow. Lars, do you have anything else you'd like to add to this conversation? I just want to make sure that
Not
we
really
give you
to
enough
add, but
time.
rather to ask if I have the opportunity.
Sure.
It's Mr. Buckler. You mentioned the heat suit that you were wearing.
Yes.
Cord,
Electric suits.
yeah, the electric suits.
Yeah.
Were they easy to disconnect if you needed?
Oh yeah, they plugged in. Even you went from your shoes, your electric shoes, up to your hat and gloves. They were all electric.
So if you needed to bail out, was it easy to kind of disconnect that and get out?
Oh yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Reason for asking is I've been speaking to one of the it was a ball turret gunner, and apparently in order to disconnect the electric suit, you needed to reach underneath you in order to get to the cord, and imagine doing that in stress and time of getting out. So that's why I was
well,
asking.
our ball turret man, he lost his power, and they had to help him out of that ball turret, and they put him up near the pilot because they had heat up where the pilot and co-pilot was, and they covered him with blankets, and he spent the next few weeks in the hospital because of frostbite.
Ooh.
Oh boy. Boy.
Right. Well, thank you.
But to say though, you had so many things to think about, like, besides sitting there and what's going on.
I'm going to try and share one more picture of that heated electric suit that you mentioned, because they are big and bulky,
Right?
and but they were what kind of saved you. Was what kept you between life and death.
Right.
Let me see here. I'm going to share it. Here we go. There you go. That's the kind of suit that you wore?
Yeah, but that's not the electric suit. The
That's
suit,
not. Okay.
no, that's over top of your electric suit.
That's over top of the electric suit. Oh
Yeah.
my. Oh geez.
They say your helmet, your gloves, they're all electric. That's
Boy,
what kept you warm.
boy, oh boy. So when I want to, and we're almost a minute away here from the end, but I want to ask you, when you came home and after the war, you had to, you were able to commute essentially from Ohio to Pittsburgh toward the end of the war. What did you tell your girlfriend about your adventures in Sweden?
I wouldn't dare.
You what?
I wouldn't tell her what happened in Sweden.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Absolutely. Oh man. What a unique story, Bob. Thank you so much for coming on. And thank you, Jack and Janet, again for making this possible. And thank you to your great grandson for coming on and showing his face with us here. And I also want to thank Henry Shopke from Wisconsin for collecting World War II veterans' autographs. If you are a World War II veteran and you would like to send Henry your autograph, let me know. And once again, I could share it. I could share his address here on the Zoom side chat. Here we go. I'm going to do it one more time, just for those of you who might have come in late. You could write down his address, send him a note with your autograph. He would love it. Hey, Cheryl, how you doing, Cheryl and Dan? Good to see you. So that means we want Jack Morrow to send an autograph, Julia Parsons, Warren Goss, Calvin Goss, Roland Glenn, Bob Buckler. And if you have any trouble getting the address, just let me know and I'll give you the address. This is so great. All right. And next week, hey, Warren, I'm going to ask you to unmute if you can. I know Warren and Mary are there. Mary, do you see unmute on the screen?
Don't touch it.
Hey,
Okay.
how you doing, Mary?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. We're on.
Does Warren know that he's the star of the show next week?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Can you
And
postpone it for about a year?
Hey, Warren, what do you think about Bob's adventure in Sweden?
I'm jealous.
I know, really. I know.
Yeah, I'd like to be in Sweden.
How about you,
Yeah.
Roland?
They were Warren.
What?
My son's here, and he danced with your wife when you was over in Germany a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
oh,
At the event up in the Butler Airport.
At the
yes.
yes. Oh
Yes.
yeah.
Hey,
Oh,
Bob, how come you don't come over to McDonald's anymore?
You got a buddy of mine. I see enough of them.
So I want
I
to
see
let
him over the
Road, don't you?
I see him over the vets. That's enough.
Hey, I want to let everybody know that Bob Buckler and Warren Goss, who landed on Utah Beach on D-Day, he will be our featured guest next week. We're going to hear his story. And he grew up not far from where Bob lived. And in fact, Bob had sisters, I guess younger sisters,
Yeah.
who would come over to your farm, huh, Warren?
Yeah, they did. They come down and play with the chickens.
And you said something like you didn't really see those girls very much because they would sleep in the house. You'd end up sleeping in the barn?
Well, that house we have is a big house, boy. The old man had a lot of. The boys' room was like a dormitory upstairs.
It was down Scott Avenue.
Mhm.
Yeah, we was back Clare Street.
Yeah. Uh-huh. We
Isn't
lived
that-
on Orchard.
In
Yeah.
them days, it was a mud street.
Yeah.
It was not paved.
No,
Well, this-
it wasn't paved.
No, not till the WPA got there. They put it in.
Isn't that great? Well, I saw Warren the other day and I just said, I would love to have 2 sessions with Warren. I mean, just one session on just his childhood alone would be entertaining and wonderful. I know that the stories you have, Warren, are great. So I'm looking forward to seeing you, Warren and Mary, next week. Okay.
We'll see you next week.
All
Yeah.
right. And
Thank you.
All right. Thank you once again, Bob, for joining us. Bob Buckler. Thank you, Lars, for joining us
Hey,
from
Bob, I'll
Sweden.
be looking for you. Come around.
No, because
Tomorrow
you'll be with
morning over there at 8 o'clock.
uh, you have to be with John.
Get your butt out of bed. You can get down to Wetzel Road every day.
It's
You
gonna
can
be
come
a
over there
hoot.
too.
Warren, I see that you have not lost that fire in the belly. I'm going to mute you here for a second, although I should mute myself because I'm laughing too much. I just want to thank Lars McKie for joining us from Sweden.
My
Lars,
pleasure,
what time is
Todd.
it in Sweden? What time is it in Sweden, Lars?
Oh, it's 10:30 right now. So but
10:30.
I'm having fun. I'm having fun.
Okay. Thank you for joining us on a Sunday night in Sweden. Nick DeVoe, I want to say hi. You're St. Lucia. Good to see you. Thanks to all of you here on the Zoom side for joining us, and also on the Facebook Live side. We'll see you next week.
Tell your brother I said hello.
Say hello to Calvin for Bob,
Yeah.
will you? All right. I'll see you guys.